but I think we can go ahead and get started. One thing we like to do is mention folks that are here in attendance, including our ELPCO board members. I see Bradley Shoup representing the West Emerson District. Thanks, Bradley, for being here. Jonathan Falk, one of our at-large members. Good to see you. Judy Short, who is our land use advisor and actually understands the zoning code in Salt Lake City, which not many people can probably admit to do. Ann Weaver is our treasurer. Thank you for being here, Ann. Jeff Larson is our East Emerson representative. Good to see you, Jeff. And William Huff and Becca Huber are the historic Gilmer representatives for the East Liberty Park Community Council. I've just admitted Michael Olosi, who is another at-large member, which means he doesn't represent a neighborhood, but kind of represents the whole area. And we have Andrew Stone as also the East Liberty Park representative. Last I saw, he was in Yosemite, so I think he's having a good time, and we'll give him a pass from tuning in on Wi-Fi from the Half Dome. And we also have Christina Robb, who represents West of East, which is the area west of East High School. Want to recognize Darren Mono, our Salt Lake City Council member. Thanks for being here, Darren. Appreciate the update you'll give us in just a little bit. But we will also start with the Salt Lake City Fire Department, who I am looking for right now. Todd Hoover, please take it away from Salt Lake City Fire. You've had a busy couple weeks, I know.
Yeah, can you hear me okay? Okay, great. Yeah, it has been a busy couple weeks, and I think the summer's going to prove to be pretty busy for all of us as well. We had a couple big fires down in the Sugar House. You probably all saw that one. We call it the Owl Building, down where the old 24-hour fitness used to be. That kind of wood shake building that had a lot of professional office spaces and stuff like that in there. That unfortunately burned down here probably about 2 weeks or so ago. Probably the biggest news for the fire department now is just upcoming July 4th with the fireworks ban in the city. So that's something that the mayor put into place, and we of course support that. We think it's a good idea. There's going to be some pushback, right? There always is on that kind of stuff, and we hope that people are just smart about it and can do what they can. On that side of it, if someone is setting off fireworks and you dial 911 or whatever, just realize that the fire department, we are not a law enforcement arm of the city. So it would be something where the police would have to come and deal with that. And there is up to like $1,000 fine, I think there is, for someone to set off illegal fireworks. But oftentimes by the time it gets called in and we show up or the police show up, that they're done with it. So there's not a whole lot we can do. So I'm not trying to play that off and just setting a realistic expectation with the police staffing right now and also with the fire department. If we get a call for, a cardiac arrest or something or fireworks, fireworks are pretty low on our priority too. So if you are calling in that stuff, just realize there will be a lag in response time and stuff. So that's about it.
Thank you. It looks like we have a question from Bradley Shoup. Did you have a question, Brad? Oh, you didn't? Okay, you're just giving a wave. I did have one question, Todd, and that is, how hot does it get when you're carrying all that equipment and dressed in all of your gear in the summer? I mean, I imagine you guys have to think about dehydration.
Oh, that was a great question, Jason. But
yeah. So, with all of our gear on, it's about 45 pounds, and then you're always carrying tools and hoses and whatnot. And certainly you're limited usually by heat exhaustion, especially in the fires that are structural kind of fires. The wildland fires, we do that whole urban interface. So we'll chase fires up behind the avenues or, behind Tomahawk, some of those kind of areas. But we don't get too deep in the woods on that because we have to keep our resources here in the city because we're being paid by the citizens of Salt Lake to provide medical services and stuff. So once it gets more than, I don't know, say a couple hundred yards, like up the hill, we'll be calling in Forest Service and different outside agencies to help with those fires. But yeah, certainly summertime when it's 102 degrees out and you get to work and fire it, it's very taxing.
We'll give you guys a preview that we do have a picture of the Salt Lake City Fire Department, Station 5 from 1911, I think, coming up in our presentation. So that will be something I think exciting for us to see. Okay.
Yeah, this station, like I guess I could add one thing there too. we spend a third of our lives here. We work 2 days on and 4 days off. So a 56-hour work schedule. And I've actually been at this station for 21 years. So I kind of feel like it's my neighborhood too.
Okay, well, thank you, Salt Lake City Fire Department. And let's head over to Detective Meinzer and Salt Lake City Police Department.
Thank you. Would you be able to pull up that information you sent to me earlier today, please?
Just give me a second and I'll get this screen shared. There it is.
All right.
And can everyone see that? Is that looking like you can see it there, Detective Meinzer?
Yep, I can see it. Looks great. So this is an awesome project that Jason's been working on. I kind of feed him the stats and he's been pulling it out. So this is our top 15 offenses from January to June 2021. The biggest one obviously is our car prowls. So that's been one of our top issues, as you can see, for the last little while. So luckily that actually has been on a decline. And we'll see that on the next slide. But I wanted to kind of real briefly talk about our top 5 specifically for June. But as I'm talking, you guys can kind of look at those top 15. So in June, we had 8 shoplifts. We had 7 car prowls. There were 7 non-reportable traffic accidents, 5 mentally ill subjects, and 5 simple assaults. So that kind of gives you an idea of the highest calls. And that's just a snapshot of the first half of June. So what I end up doing is I will end up sending the full month of stats to Jason. That way we can track them and that will reflect on this chart that you see here. If you could go to the next slide for me.
Sure. As soon as I figure out how to do that. There we go.
Thank you. So this is a good representation to show the car prowls since January. As you see, we're kind of on that decline I mentioned before. So that is on average, our number one issue that's been reported. As you see, there was a total of 67. So we're kind of on a good downhill right now. Please keep looking out in your neighborhoods. If you see people checking door handles, call it in. Try and give us a good description of what they look like, which way they were going. Remember, shoes are not easy to change. So if someone's walking around in a neighborhood, they're not likely going to be carrying extra shoes. So that's one thing to call in, call our non-emergency, and I can put that number in the chat. And if you can go to the next page for me, please.
Yeah.
So this is a graph. It shows comparing June through March and April to June. So as you see again, once again, the car prowls are decreasing, but we do see an increase in burglaries of residences. So the majority of these are happening from unlocked residences. So it's actually the same thing with our car prowls. A lot of what we're seeing is people trying to take quick opportunities. They want to try and get anything that they can real fast. Breaking windows is not super quick. It's loud. So please keep an eye out for that as well. If you see someone going door to door and they don't look like a salesperson, like they're not talking to people at the doorstep, that could be something that you could call in as well. I did want to mention though, in June, we did not have any burglary reports so far. So there could be more that happen at the end of the month after this meeting for the rest of the month, but so far we've had 0 this month. So I'm hoping that we can try and decrease those numbers so that it doesn't keep increasing, but we'll work together and please keep reporting what you guys see. So those slides are awesome. Take a look at them when you have extra time. So I did want to mention about the fire safety. So when you guys do call dispatch, please call the non-emergency line. So only call that 911 number if it is an emergency. If you see a fire, absolutely feel free to call 911. If you feel that it's a safety issue, if you think someone's going to get hurt, call who you feel is necessary. If you feel like it's 911, feel free to call 911. But if you just have neighbors that are lighting fireworks, we try to recommend not to tie up that 911 line. That way it's always open for emergencies. And I will put the non-emergency phone number in the chat. I'm also real quick going to put the bike registration link in the chat because I think that's also equally important. And do we have any questions for me?
Any questions for Detective Meinzer?
And then also I will put the link, if anyone is interested in a further dive into the stats, we have them online, open to the public, and you can go ahead and dive as deep as you want for the whole city or your area. And you're always welcome to contact me and I can go over them with you. Thanks. If there's any more questions, I'll look for them in the chat.
Thank you also, Detective Meinzer, for giving us these ELPCO specific stats. It's really good for us to know exactly what's going on within our boundaries and, you know, not just within the broader District 5. And definitely car prowls seem to be the issue, but they're on a good trend. So we'll keep doing that. And thank you also for talking about fire issues. We know that we are in a tight spot right now in Utah. So want to make sure that we keep our neighborhoods safe. So thank you. All right.
Thanks.
Next on the agenda, we have Council Member Darren Mono joining us. So there's been a lot happening at the City Council. Darren, I sent you a couple of topics ahead of time, but hopefully we'll get some questions from the audience as well. And please take it away. One second, we had some security lockdown, so let me go and fix that.
Thanks, Jason.
Sure.
Yeah, so some of the questions you asked were, let's start with the budget, because that's the biggest thing that we just finished. We adopted our budget a couple weeks ago, and I think the grand total is something about 385 million. I might be transposing some of those numbers, but there are a couple things that they're doing that there are many things that the budget does, but a couple of highlights are the looking at public safety. So some of the public safety related items, we've doubled the number of social workers in the police department that can go out on those co-responder calls. Also looking at potentially having social workers go to some lower priority calls on their own. The chief had mentioned something about a pilot program for that. We've doubled the funding for the number of social workers. We funded requests from 911 dispatch. There's been a ton of turnover in dispatch. It's a low paid sort of high stress position. And so we funded a 32-hour work week pilot program. So I think we funded it starting in October, because that's as soon as they said they could ramp it up. The 911 dispatchers will only be working 32-hour weeks, which I guess there's some national trends that show that is a better model for that job. We increased another medical response team it's most likely going to be split between Ballpark and Poplar Grove. That's like an SUV that has medical equipment so that we don't have to have the full fire truck out there and having wear and tear on the multi-million-dollar vehicle. And we have $2 million that was set aside for future conversations with the REP Commission. And I think the most significant thing we did is we answered a call from the police union. It's not finalized yet, so I don't know exactly where we're going to land, but the councils in our discussions have supported the idea that Salt Lake City needs to be the best paying police department in the state, because our police officers are asked to do the very most in the state. And so we made it clear that we also agree with that. And so pending the finalization of those MOU negotiations with union leadership, it's looking like we should be this coming year the highest paid police department in the state. So that's important, and that dovetails into, Jason, I think your first question, which was about how we're addressing the shortfall in Salt Lake City police employment. So obviously hearing the union and within those negotiations, we increased, the budget started with a 1% across the board. Every employee in the city had a 1% raise. And that will be significantly higher for the police department and the fire department And it's also 2% for everyone else. And then we're still not sure with the AFSCME represented employees. I think it'll be higher than 2% as well. So represented employees are going to get a higher raise, but everyone's going to get at least double what we started with in the budget process. The city's also been surveying some of the former police officers that have left, asking them why they left, and what sort of led up to that. It sounds like there's a lot of different reasons. Some people have left police work altogether. Others left for pay, which hopefully we'll be resolving that with this budget. Others, it sounds like there's a lot of different reasons. So the ones that we can control, we're trying to control. And then of course, just continuing to advertise and try and hire. So we understand that that's a concern right now, and that call times are up, and that's not a scenario that I'm comfortable with, nor do I believe any of the other council members are. And we have a standing item on every single agenda where we hear from Chief Brown and the mayor's office about items related to public safety. So every single council meeting since for over a year now, we've had a item on our agenda to discuss that. Jumping back to budget, a few other things that the budget does, and I probably am going too long, aren't I? The couple things that are important to me are that we made a statement and we funded public lands and parks. We elevated that division into a department, and we've increased quite a bit of staffing for that department. I think a lot of people have let me know and have let the council know that they don't believe that we're doing a good job of managing our public lands and our parks, and that we could be doing more. And so that's probably the largest increase in resources and staffing of any individual department. A couple divisions moved between department, but that was engineering moved from one to the other, and a few other things. But there are 60 new positions in the city that will be funded. And then we also increased the CIP from where the mayor had set at 6% for the CIP budget for the year. We increased that to up over 7%. And I think those are some of the major things. Happy to take any budget related questions, or I can jump to Jason's last question to me.
Might be good to do the budget questions now. Are there any questions for Darren? I think there might have been, is there one or two in the, no, it doesn't look like there's any in the chat. But when will the budget be finalized? Is that the truth?
So the budget was adopted 2 weeks ago. This week on Monday, we had sort of a after the fact kind of emergency meeting to change because of the union negotiations, not just police, fire, and AFSCME. Because of the union negotiations, we had sort of a emergency meeting to free up a little bit of additional funds for those negotiations, and those negotiations are still ongoing. So assuming the three unions adopt the MOU, then the budget has already been finalized. If not, I don't know what will happen. We may have to reconvene and make another budget amendment. At this point, it will probably have to be done in a budget amendment. So for all intents and purposes, it is finalized now. Regarding CIP, additional projects be recommended for funding by the City Council in September. Yes, so the CIP process, in the mayor's recommended budget, there was a certain amount of projects that were recommended for funding. The council will have the final decision as to if those are the projects that will be funded in the end of summer. But we've also increased the number above what the mayor recommended. So there will be at least a few additional projects that we can add to the list. And then of course, we could always take one of the projects off the list and add a different one on, depending on public input and other things. The two that I've heard of, I've heard most about have been traffic calming up on Capitol Hill. I guess there's some major issues with speeding and sort of racing through those streets, and then tennis courts. Those are the ones that the most the highest number of people have reached out, but some specific District 5 ones are a new public garden on 7th East that was not recommended for funding. So that's one that I'd be interested in, but I haven't heard a ton from the community on that. So if there's any specific projects that were not funded, or even that you're very supportive of, now would be the time to start letting the council know so that we make sure we have that input. I am also interested to learn about learn more about CIP applications, like why they were scored certain ways. I also am not sure about that. It sounds like the CIP application process, to me, a lot of things that were that I would have thought would have been really strongly scored were not recommended. So I'm not exactly sure why all those things. I myself am not entirely sure. There's an entire board that does that. They recommend it to the mayor, then the mayor recommends to us, and then we make the final decision. So, but that process will be happening in the summer. The last question Jason asked, which is I think a question we're all asking each other, is how can we start to reconnect after 18 months of isolation? I think, Jason, you mentioned the Bryan Avenue block party that happened last week. I attended that. It was great. And it was fun to be outside, be with people, and just be together. So if anybody's interested in that, that I think would be incredible. I'm excited for the 9th Street Festival that you all will be having. I'll be there, and I'm excited for those. I would say just one thing that's really fun is the open streets, or whatever they call it, downtown on Main Street. Every weekend we'll have Main Street closed down for a few blocks, and so businesses can kind of spill out into the street. So I would attend that. I think that's a great event and something that will happen every weekend throughout the summer. And then just make sure that everyone's encouraging those around them to get vaccinated so that we can all safely get back together. The city council we're hoping to get back in person. It sounds like ELPCO has a plan to get back in person. I think I'm excited for that. So let's keep getting vaccinated and keep making those plans to get back in person. That's all I have prepared, but are there any general city council questions I can field?
Any questions for Darren? Let's see.
Oh, I see a street maintenance question.
That's right.
So the general obligation bond that was approved by taxpayers a few years ago is still happening, and that will allow for street maintenance. And 300 West is in the process. If you've driven there, you can't miss that there's construction on 300 West. But that's the first GEO bond funded major project, and I think one of the biggest streets projects Salt Lake City has ever done. But those are going to continue. Of course, street maintenance is underfunded and is still underfunded, but it has continued to be a priority there's sort of 3 funding streams: the GEO bond, the Funding Our Future. One of the 4 is one of the 4 categories for Funding Our Future, street maintenance, and then there's the $0.25 for transportation that comes through the county. So there's 3 buckets of money that are appropriate for street maintenance.
Thanks for answering that. And I have heard that 11th East is on the short list to get redone, which is a street that many of us use in ELPCO, and bounce along it is one way to put it. So that will be one that I think we'll all be glad to see resurfaced, although got to avoid it while it's being done, and then you can enjoy it, kind of like 13th East right now. Great. Well, thank you, Darren, for being here and telling us about what's going on at City Council. I did see that Felicia Baca also posted that the Living Traditions Festival, the last event, is this weekend. And I think, is that at Washington Square Park, or is that where that is? Yes. Okay. So that is a great festival that's been spread out a little bit this year. And always a lot of fun, great food and culture and music. So thank you all for being here. We've got our next presentation online, which is the main event. And that is Cherry Willis from Salt Lake City Public Library is here to give us a presentation about the hidden history of Salt Lake City. She's got 40 slides that she's put together. So I'm going to turn it right over to her so that she can just start teaching us about the city we live in. Cherry, just give me a moment to unmute you, and you should be a co-host.
Everyone, it is such a pleasure to be with you tonight, and I'm going to give you this fire hose of information. I don't want to detract from our, expertly done agenda. Afterwards, at the meeting, if you have other questions or put them in the chat, we'll try and get to them. And I also have a list of resources, and you can always contact me at the city library, and I will do whatever I can to help you find more information. So hopefully my share will work here, and we'll get going. How does that look for everybody? Does that look okay? Good. Okay, so the East Liberty Park Community Organization, hopefully this will give you some idea of where you live and get you some greater appreciation for truly our amazing area, and it is amazing. So this little slice here I have is from an 1893 Reflex, which is a book of lithographs that are based on photographs that were taken by Charles Savage, who was a very prominent Salt Lake photographer in the 1800s. And this is just a tiny little piece of it because it's the only thing that actually shows our neighborhood that I could find from the 19th century. What you can kind of see here is Liberty Park. Here's going to be 8th. And you can see that even in 1893, we are definitely a rural community. This is as far as it goes. So as I like to say, you're off the map, Jack. Here there be monsters. So to get to the history here, our history in Salt Lake Valley, of course, goes way, way back. Right now, and way back during the time of the pioneers, there really were not Native American tribes living in the valley, but they certainly used the valley just like we do today as a crossroads. But hundreds and hundreds of years before, they did have settlements. And I think it's really fascinating that in the early part of our century, there have been several instances where people have been digging in their yards and have uncovered skeletons. This, as you can see, is at 1131 South, 11th East. The folks had to replace a water main, and as they were digging, they uncovered a skeleton. And of course, the first thing you do when you have a skeleton is you call the police department. And fortunately, the police department discovered that this was not a homicide or a missing person from our century. So when the appropriate people from state history and the medical examiners were called in, it was determined that this individual was most likely a Fremont Native American Indian from about 1,000 years ago. And it's interesting because all of these skeletons that they have been finding around, like in Rose Park and downtown here in our own neighborhood, have all been probably in that Fremont tribe and from about 1,000 years ago. So we go way back. It's an exciting, exciting neighborhood to live in. This right here is this wonderful bird's eye view. This is from, you can see, 1875. This shows the valley. This shows the wonderful grid system that we all love and are so famous for in Salt Lake. The plan for Salt Lake City is so unique because it goes much further back than 1847. Salt Lake City is planned on the city of Joseph, or the city of Zion, as developed by Joseph Smith. This goes by both those names, City of Joseph, City of Zion. And Joseph Smith is the one that laid out the plan so that when Brigham Young and the pioneers came here in 1847, they already had the place already mapped out in their heads with these fabulous big right angle blocks that lay things out perfectly. And our area here is going to be up in this lovely white broad area clear up here. And that was at the time, and for many decades after the first settlement of Salt Lake City, we live in what is known as the Big Field, or the 5-acre survey. because what happened is people would come to the valley, and in the early days, especially the first couple decades, they would be given a plot of land closer to the city center. That would be about 1.5 acres. And then they could petition, if they were going to be farmers, to get a 5 to 10 acre plot up here in the 5-acre survey, which is what our area is. And so for many, many, many years, our neighborhood was sparsely settled, just like you saw in that first picture. And it was basically a very pastoral retreat from the hustle and the bustle of the city. So that's another reason why we're hardly ever on maps. Even the 1889 Sanborn maps, there's only a little slice of 9th and 9th to show the flour mills. But we're not on the rest of the maps because we were outside the city. We were this wonderful rural area. This is another picture. I just love this one because this indicates how we got the names of the wards, which were not just LDS congregations, but they were also those political subdivisions like you'd see like in New Orleans with the wards. This is how the city was organized. And down here in that little corner, we have a little tiny piece of our neighborhood. And interestingly enough, that is the first ward. And how they numbered it, you can see as it snakes around to the west, comes back to the east, snakes around back. And that's how they numbered them. So if you've ever wondered why the first ward is down in our neck of the woods, that's why. And it also helps you kind of see how, again, those wonderful blocks are laid out. You're also being able to start seeing some of these lines through the maps. These are going to be streetcar lines. At this point, they're drawn by mules, and also the canal system, which we'll talk a little about too.
Sherry, can I interrupt just for one quick second?
Sure.
The viewers have asked if you might be able to put it on display mode, which I think when we did our test run, you hit that little button.
Oh, you know, I did, and I completely forgot about that. Thank you. Is that better?
I'm not sure. That looks better on my screen, but everyone's screen might be a little different. Thumbs up if that looks better. Looks bigger.
Does it better?
Great. Okay,
Great.
that works.
Oh,
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I knew I was forgetting a button somewhere. Thank you. So now we're going to talk about the water system, because water is at everybody's forefront thought right now. Salt Lake has always had a problem with water. We are a high mountain desert climate. It's like the hardest climate ever. But the valley was also blessed with, we know, our 7 creeks and springs throughout the area, especially up here in the 5-acre survey. And so right after the pioneers came here, within days, they started diverting City Creek and starting to use the irrigation water. And after several decades, Brigham Young said, we've got to get some organized water here. Well, by that time, the farmers up in our neck of the woods had all the water rights. And so the city got together and they had a plan where they would have contracts with exchanges of water from the creek water, and then started to use water clear down from Utah Lake that was pumped up into this system called the Salt Lake and Jordan Canal. Now, very few of us, but some of us do, and I know in our neighborhood still have water rights. Yay! And that water does still come up from Utah Lake. You don't drink it, you use it to water your stuff. Don't drink that water. As this all was happening, the city was also then laying pipes with this Salt Lake Jordan Canal to bring that water through the valleys. And I love this picture because this is our neighborhood. We were a little later than the rest of the city because, again, we're out in the sticks. This is 11th East. These are wood mills on either side. And this shows you the wonderful wood slat pipes that our original water used to run through. All through the area, you have these fabulous big wood stave pipes, which would later be replaced by iron. But we were able to cover up the Jordan River Canal and have these wonderful pipes because, you know, people kept falling in the canals and drowning because they were significant. So this was another huge civil process. It actually started in the 1870s, downtown area. It was finished in the 1880s. We get ours a little bit later. Water, always a big issue in Salt Lake. but managed amazingly well from the very, very first. This map here begins to show you how things are starting to be subdivided. And I love this map too, because it has some really early subdivisions that will be broken up later on. I live in what is known as the Lincoln Park, because I do live on Lincoln. And it also shows that there are a couple different types of tracks you are going to encounter in our neighborhood. Some of them are actual train tracks, narrow gauge, that actually went up to Fort Douglas. And some of them are streetcars, because we have a fascinating history with streetcars. Now, as people moved into the 5-acre survey in the 1870s, 1880s, 1890s, land speculation just went bananas. And people were selling off their farms in order to gather that money and move out, move to different places in the whole territory. And these subdivisions start getting named. Sometimes they're named for the people who lived in the area or had been part of the area. Sometimes they're named, like Parkview is an obvious one. The Gilmers or the Gilmer family, they lived there. The Young is the LeGrand Young. And this area right here will become Garden Park Ward on his estate. Inglewood is more of a, a lovely pastoral name, like Windsor. Windsor was used a lot in lots and lots of places, Windsor Place, Windsor Park. And Woodmansee, which was a question I had early on, was named for the Woodmansee family. They lived there. And for those people who are familiar with some hymns, Emily Woodmansee is the one who wrote As Sisters in Zion. So we have that kind of connection, and that's where the Woodmansee comes from. The streetcar system is fascinating because Salt Lake, sometimes gets a bad rap, sometimes outside of our own little community. Salt Lake has always been progressive, always been at the top of things. We were one of the first 5 cities in the world to have central electricity. We had electricity in 1888. After London, New York, San Francisco, and Cleveland, we had electricity. And right after electricity, they changed those mules that ran streetcars into electric streetcars. This is actually a very early one. This is like from the 1900s. I love that car. But by the 1820s, streetcars were the way to go. About half of all adults in this area rode streetcars. And there was one that ran right down 9th East, ran down 11th East. The tracks were everywhere. You can see how the grid was just full of streetcars. And it was a fascinating history with our streetcars. But in this even amazing heyday, they finally started declining in the late 1830s. By 1941, the last streetcar made its trip, and they had been all replaced by that time by electric buses or by gas buses. So for a while, it was just an amazing setup, but the tracks were there and the wires over the streets were really kind of almost a pollution among themselves, but the streetcars were amazing. This kind of gives you, again, some more idea of the various subdivisions we had. I've talked about, I think, most of them. Some of these are about the people who lived there or worked there. And then the street names are tricky when you're trying to do history in Salt Lake, because prior to 1916, some of our major arteries in our neck of the woods were different names, because again, we were the rural place. So after 8th South, as people moved further this direction, instead of our 10-acre blocks, which is what our grid is based on, the blocks were even bigger. And so after 1916, they shortened the blocks and they had to rename the streets. And when you look at some of the maps in the 1900s, you can see there are lots of names that just don't exist anymore. And even streets like Sherlock, that's a street that was completely gobbled up by the Smith's parking lot. So I had a question too about why we're called Sugar House. This is one of my favorite stories because I have lived here my whole life. The Sugar House is named after the sugar factory. Even though this picture is a later date, it shows the wonderful light streets, it shows the power poles, shows the tracks. The building was still there. The building was designed by Truman O. Angell, who was the architect for the Salt Lake Temple. And it was begun in 1854, so soon after the Saints arrived here, because Brigham Young wanted the city to be totally self-sufficient. And one of the hardest things was getting sugar. And they discovered that in France, people were making sugar out of sugar beets. So they got a lot of sugar beet seeds. They sent for a sugar factory, literally shipped here. It took 52 oxen teams to bring the equipment here. They put the whole thing together. They got a good quality molasses out of it for a year. And then after that, the poor thing just could not survive. It just never, ever made good quality sugar. And they closed it down as a sugar factory. But that is the name that stuck. As more people began to move to this rural area, I love her name, Ma Smoot, Margaret Smoot. She was the wife of the local head there, really, of the area, and he was the bishop of the Sugar House ward. She said, let's call it Sugar House, because that made sense. This building right here, if you don't know this, and I should have said that, this is right on the corner of Highland Drive, 11th East, and 21st South. It's where the Barnes and Noble is. So this is where the Sugar House was, right at the Barnes and Noble area. They used the factory for a paper mill. They used it for a button factory and a machine shop and lots and lots and lots of other. They never let it go to waste until it was finally torn down in 1928. My favorite story about the paper mill is that in the newspaper, especially the Deseret News, there would always be this crying need for rags, because rags were so needed to make the paper. And they just never seemed to get enough rags to make their paper. And so a remark began to circulate and become quite famous that the citizens of Salt Lake would rather wear their rags than read them. So we're going to talk about some old buildings to go start out with. This is the earliest one I can find, our oldest commercial building. And it's actually in the back of what is now the Barbacoa on 9th and 9th. And it is the Leffler building. It started out as a flour mill in 1878. And that part of the building is still standing. Then a little while later, the flour mill was sold to a couple other hands. The Woodman building was built onto the front of it. And this building has seen tons of different types of businesses, a steam carpet cleaning. It's been several grocery stores and retail spaces. Now, of course, it's a restaurant and there are apartments up there. I'm so glad that they have taken such a beautiful job of maintaining this beautiful building, because it's our oldest as far as a commercial building. When you talk about buildings in the area, you have to talk about churches, because those are probably the most prominent, other than homes, in our area at this time period. And these are some wards that have disappeared. Either their buildings have disappeared, or actually the congregation has been moved other places and the name has been lost entirely. And the reason that that's important is because it shows that the demographics changing so significantly in our area. The first ward in our area would have been the Emerson Ward. And this was built in 1905. It was destroyed by fire in 1916. It was just an electrical fire. And the next one right over here to its right, that's what replaced it. And this particular rendition of Emerson Ward was later remodeled even further in the 50s. And then this building was completely torn down. And in kind of a reverse of what generally happens when buildings are torn down, houses were built instead. Instead of tearing down the houses to build another building, this actually got houses in it. But the cool thing is you see the flagpole. The flagpole is still there. The house is on Emerson, and you can go see the flagpole. It's pretty cool. This next ward next to it is the Bryan Ward. This is the ward I actually grew up in. This is a fabulous old Art Deco building. It was built entirely by the citizens of this area. They had to scrounge. The bricks inside were secondhand bricks. It was built during the Depression. It's this beautiful Art Deco rendition. It actually shows up in a lot of architecture books because it was unique. And it was very, very loved because the people had to pay for it and build it themselves. This building was torn down to build the Sugar House Steak Center, which we'll talk about. So that land was preserved, and it's still, that land's there today. This beautiful ward here is the LeGrand ward, named for LeGrand Young, but not from his property. And that building no longer stands, but it has been replaced by a new building, which we'll show you in a minute, and that's going to be the 31st ward. And this lovely building here, fortunately, has new life. This was the 31st ward and at times the 36th ward. It was then purchased and is used for the realms of inquiry as a school. And now it is the Ignacio de Cristo Church, which is a Filipino Christian church. So it adds a little layer of greater diversity in our area. And we're really glad that that building is still standing. Some other buildings that have come and gone. This building I remember from my childhood. This is the Bethel Baptist Church, and this sits where the University Pet Clinic is right now. But it served a wide congregation and was very, very active in the community and very active trying to turn its local Mormon members to, they felt, what was the light. There was a mission attached to it. But this is the Bethel Church, and it's just charming. I love this building. It looks like something out of like Tombstone or something. This is the St. John's Chapel. It's an Episcopal church, and you may recognize it. It's now an adorable yellow private residence there on 9th East, which I think is just an amazing ability. It just is such a cute building. This really lovely building is the Liberty Park Methodist Episcopal Church. It was torn down, but fortunately was replaced by that congregation. And then now it is the Life in Christ Christian Reformed Church. They were all very connected, this particular church building, with its congregation. And so you can kind of see where that is. And that's on the corner of 8th and 9th. And we'll show you the building that has replaced it. This is the building that replaces it right there. And I feel bad I didn't take the other shot of the back because it has this beautiful stained glass window. It's a lovely, lovely building in our community. This is what was the Salt Lake Sugar House Steak building. And it housed the Bryan Ward, the Emerson Ward. It housed the Sugar House Ward, which actually has its own building, which is now where they're attending. But this building has also held several other congregations. Currently now it is home to the Pioneer and the Liberty 3rd wards. Those are both Tongan wards. The thing that's exciting about our area is we have had a lot of ethnic wards call our buildings in our neighborhood home. The old Emerson Ward had a Samoan ward. And this ward, this building here also housed the Swahili branch, which was huge. It was an amazing congregation of refugees from all over Africa, speaking all different kinds of African dialects. It was an amazing and charming congregation, and that's moved to another part of our valley. This is, of course, the Garden Park Ward. And I have to tell you, do you know how hard it is to find a picture of this ward that doesn't have brides in it and the backyard? Very few pictures of the actual ward, but of the gardens, which are exquisite. If you have never seen the Garden Park Ward, you need to go and visit the gardens. They are what's left of the estate of LeGrand Young, and it's exquisite. This here is the Emerson Ward, which at one time had been the Hawthorne, Marlborough, and Roosevelt wards. When I was a kid, we used to think it was hilarious that a ward was named after a cigarette. Not really, but Marlborough was one of our congregation areas. And then this one here is coming back, total first circle. This is the 31st ward and the 1st ward. So now you know where the 1st ward comes from. It was from the very edge of the map. And now we get to claim the 1st ward again as ours. Now, another big, huge part is also, of course, going to be schools. And while we have lots of the edges of our area that will go to schools outside our area, I'm going to talk about the 3 buildings that are actually in our neighborhood. And the first, of course, is Emerson School. And actually, Emerson Ward is actually named after the school, not Ralph Waldo Emerson, because the school was so critical to this neighborhood. This is one of the very first big schools built in the state. And at one time, it was said it was the largest elementary school west of the Mississippi. It starts out in 1894, and in about the late 1890s, 23 school teachers and their families moved to our area to get their children away from the corrupting influence of Salt Lake City. And of course, being school teachers, they had to have a school. And so they built this beautiful little brick school. And within just years, it had to be expanded. And they call this the train, because you can see how it keeps adding and adding and adding, like adding on train cars. This is the school I grew up in. This is the one I know. And it is a charming, wonderful school and very much a part of the community. This is what it looks like today. Its claim to fame is the architect for the building was also the architect for Symphony Hall, Bravenel Hall. But I have to tell you, I really prefer the old one. And this wonderful building here was called the Emerson Annex, attached economically and culturally with the Emerson School. This is up on 13th South. And this school was an orphanage. And then later on, it became the Villa Nursing Home, then Hillside Rehab Center. And now the place where it stands now is the amazing In-Between, which is our hospice for homeless people. The In-Between is a tremendous resource and such a fabulous blessing to so many people's lives. And it's such a delight to have it in our neighborhood. But I love this building because it shows why this area in this building was called the Villa. For people who've been around this area long enough, when they tore this down and built the building that currently the In-Between is in, and it was Hillside Rehab Center, everybody in the neighborhood always called it the Villa. And people would say, why on earth are you calling that the Villa? Well, because at one time, this is what it looked like. And so it was a big part of our neighborhood. And today, it's an even more important resource to help citizens in our neighborhood. The junior high was Roosevelt Junior High. And that now has a second life, which is wonderful. It is the Roland Hall St. Mark's Middle School. They have fabulous programs there, and it's exciting to see that this 100-year-old building has this great life. And I put this picture here just because I love this picture. This is taken from the 50s in Roosevelt, and it's sort of like, wow, water, what an invention. And of course, the high schools always have a massive influence on the area. This is our East Side High. This is such a fascinating history because we always think of West as being the oldest high school. East kind of can almost claim that because what happened was there was Salt Lake City High. It had to be divided into West and East. West got their building first. But East building was done in 1914. I love the picture of the dancers and I love the mud. You can see the streetcar and then this little 1915, the little tiny little jalopy here trying to make its way through the mud. And I love comparing the dancers. These, of course, are High School Musical dancers. That's kind of our big movie claim to fame, High School Musical. And just so you know, if your kids have ever seen High School Musical, Sharpay's lockers are still there and they're still pink. Now, this is the fire station. This is such an important, and I have to apologize to Jason. I thought it was 1911. It's even earlier, 1907. And look at the cute horse. This was a significant moment in the neighborhood, 1907, because for us, that's pretty early. But that says we are a real community. We have a fire station. And that was a big thing. And it sits right there where our fire station sits today. Now, I had a great question about the golf course. There was a golf course, and it was the genesis of the Salt Lake Country Club. This was on the grounds of the Gilmore Park area, the Gilmore family estate, and they leased this land to the city to establish a golf course with the clubhouse. A Spalding traveling salesman said, oh yeah, this course is going to be as good as anything back east. I'm sure he just wanted to sell his merchandise because it was a terrible golf course. It was a whole, half 2 blocks away from the streetcar line because it started on 11th East. The streetcar's at 9th at this time. It's rocky, it's hilly. I can't even imagine why someone would build a golf course on a slope like that. It was a terrible course, but it lasted for 5 years. And it gave people the impetus to then build Forest Dale, which of course now is part of Sugar House as well. But yeah, this was the Gilmer Golf Course and the beginning of the Clyde Club. Now I had a question too about the zoo, and I can talk forever about the zoo, but I'll make this really fast. This is the wonderful Liberty Park Zoo. And one of my favorite things in the world is Princess Alice. The Liberty Park Zoo started out in 1911 when they received a few deer that they put on exhibit. It was such a hit that the park decided, wow, we should have more animals. And so they just kind of went up in the hills and collected native animals, things like mallard ducks and quail and a fox, skunk, some more deer, but it was hugely popular. And then a traveling circus came through with a really interesting temperamental elephant. And they offered to sell the elephant, and the children of the city collected pennies and nickels for a $3,000 elephant, which was, I think, amazing. It was Princess Alice. She's named after Teddy Roosevelt's daughter, Alice. If you know anything about Alice, Princess Alice the elephant and Alice Roosevelt, similar personalities. The one tragedy, and I have to say this because it's really sad, but you have to know the truth. Truth is important. They did breed Alice. She did have a wonderful, adorable calf. She accidentally rolled on him and killed him, and she mourned for days. But Alice is so intelligent. At one time, her trainer was removed. She went on a hunger strike for 10 days until he was reinstated. The problem with Alice is she liked to roam, and she would kick out her restraining walls on her enclosure, and she would run up and down the neighborhood. And when she did that, this was back in 1916, 17, 1920s, early 1930s, she would often take along with her the clotheslines and the laundry that she was picking up as a little festoon around her neck. She would, of course, trample people's gardens, their vegetable patches. The neighbors really got tired of Alice. And at that point, the wonderful Hogle family said, we really want to keep Alice. We don't want to get rid of her or lose her. We're going to give you this wonderful piece of property up Immigration. And that's where Hogle Zoo comes from. And that's where Alice then goes to. So our one remnant of Alice at the zoo, if you go to the reptile house, that fabulous carving over the door, that is an actual portrait of Alice. The sculptor sculpted Alice's face. This is one of the mystery buildings I just love. I just think it's fascinating. It's there on 8th East and just north of 8th South. This is the Highland Exchange building. This is where your telephone calls went through. And lately, in the 50s, it was bought by the church. It was used as the storehouse, a shoe factory, and also the soap factory warehouse. Now it's going to be condos. It is a beautiful building, but I love this building because it shows how forward thinking the phone company was. This is one of the few libraries that they put into an actual business. And so this is actually a city library in just this business, just for the ladies who work the switchboards. They also had a garden roof. I mean, this is like working for Pixar back in the 1920s. It was just forward thinking and amazing. And so I think that is one of our great buildings. I'm so glad it's being preserved. Just across the street from that building is this beautiful garden courtyard. It is so well preserved in our city. We're so lucky to have something so beautifully preserved. Just a wonderful little neighborhood. We have 3 parks in our neighborhood. We have Englewood Park, named after that subdivision Englewood. We have the Herman Franks Park, which is named after the great baseball player from East High and also manager. He played for the Dodgers when they were dem bums back in Brooklyn. He coached and managed the Giants, and I don't know if it was so great to say he managed the Cubs, but huge man in baseball. So our baseball field there on the corner of 7th and 13th, that's named for him. And then we have this lovely little park named for Beatrice Evans. Her family is very well connected. Her family built this in her honor, and it's just a charming park right there in the middle of Gilmer. We've had some famous people live here. One of the most, probably seriously, the most famous person to have lived in our neighborhood is Russell M. Nelson. He lived on 13th East and about 940 South. Also, Joseph Fielding Smith, who was also president of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. We had a couple other general authorities. You can see that list. And we also had a governor, Herbert Maw. We had Elizabeth Pugsley Hayward, who it just fascinates me. She's an amazing woman, because you'll notice that she was elected to the House of Representatives and as a state senator. And always remember, she's elected and serving in these positions before the 1920 amendment that gave all women the right to vote. Utah is just a fascinating, fabulous place. Probably the most famous person, though, really is Fay Wray. Fay Wray grew up for a little time, just a short time, on Sherman, just above 8th East. And she, of course, is the love of King Kong's life. No one did it better than Fay. This wonderful house that my sisters and I used to call the Munster House, it housed the fabulous studio for the Fairbanks family. And they are amazing. And why you say the Fairbanks family should have impact, it's because there's something that Avard Fairbanks did that will be part of history forever. And that is, he came up with the concept of the ram for the Dodge vehicle. Originally, he made a radiator cap head for the Plymouth in 1931. It's called the Flying Lady. Actually, it's a mermaid, but it's beautiful. Avard then was called by the company and said, you know, we've got 10,000 cars coming out with this name Dodge. We need a symbol. He brought his books, he brought his clay, and he said, how about a ram? And they said, why a ram? And he said, well, if you see a ram coming down the path, you dodge. And they loved it. And so Dodge Ram is due to Avard Fairbanks. He also did the big leopard that's in East High, and he also did the mountain lions up by the Hogle Zoo. And I love this house, and that's just why I put it in there. It's one of our earliest houses, and it's so beautifully kept, and it's there on 17th South. Now, we talked about the Perkins addition as a subdivision. This is a really cool thing. The Perkins addition was this massive project to build these massive, beautiful houses in the Victorian eclectic style. They're all a little different. And the reason they're important is that this is the first big incursion of a Gentile or non-LDS neighborhood. And it's built around a streetcar. And streetcar suburbs are important throughout the nation because it shows that development and why transportation was important. There are at least 10 of these houses still standing, and they are beautiful. They're all a little different, and it really impacts how our southern eastern part of our neighborhood has grown and developed because of the streetcar. And they would have built more of them, but it's felt that the 1893 Depression really curtailed this project. But if we're going to talk about houses, we got to talk about the Joe Vincent Chateau. This is the house up on Yale. This is incredible. And it's kind of like it almost feels like a mafioso story, but it's not really. Joe Vincent started out in 1916 with a saloon. In a few years, he's selling soda and offering billiards. And the next thing you know, he's got a fabulous cafe that's everybody's favorite. And in 1926, just 10 years after his saloon, he's able to build this chateau. But he's had some dark times in his life. When he lived on, I think, 12th East, he had a little girl, 2 years old. She died horribly from a scalding water accident. And at his Joe Vincent's cafe, he had a woman fall through the ceiling as she was waiting for her boyfriend. That did her damage. And he also had an employee lose a finger on a meat cutter. And then he himself was arrested because apparently he had gambling going on in his establishment. He himself dies a fiery death at an automobile crash in 1936 in Colorado. They bring him home. He has his funeral in the LeGrand ward, and all the luminaries speak, and even the chief of police is one of his pallbearers. So he was a really colorful character to go along with his house. Now we're going to finish up really fast with 9th and 9th, which is such an amazing area because it really shows the eclectic, fabulous nature of our area. Jason asked me how many gas stations were around. In actual 9th and 9th, there were always just two, one where the dry cleaners is and one where the vessel is now. But interestingly enough, back in the 1870s, rather than gas stations, it was flour mills because there were 3 flour mills at 9th and 9th in the 1880s. But going along with the gas station theme, even though there were 2 at 9th and 9th, at 9th and 11th, just 2 blocks up, there were 3 gas stations. So 5 gas stations in a 2 block radius is a lot. But that was because in 1950s, we were motoring. There's a wonderful urban legend that Starbucks threw in the towel and could not beat Coffee Garden. Starbucks actually offered to buy Coffee Garden. They said no. And Coffee Garden hung in there strong, and Starbucks left. Now, Starbucks' story is they left because they wanted a drive-up feature that was not possible in our neighborhood. And that's the story they're sticking with. But the Coffee Garden is a cherished and loved spot here in our neighborhood. The tower is so fabulous. This is what it actually looked like. That's why it's called the tower. You see that in 1927 is when it was built. It got talkies right away. It had the first air conditioning in any movie theater in town. They changed the facade in 1950. I don't know why. I loved this one. And it is currently the oldest continually moving theater. So the tower has changed a lot. Now, as an art house film, it kind of really fits the vibe of 9th and 9th. The vibe of 9th and 9th has a lot to do with this place, Cosmic Aeroplane. As you'll see from the Polk directory, it is a psychedelic shop. In the 60s, it actually truly was a head shop. That's where you got your various equipment. And it didn't last in 9th and 9th too long before it moved closer into town. But it really kind of set the stage for the vibe of 9th and 9th. We have some amazing things on 9th and 9th, like our fabulous 9 Muses by Troy Pillar. I just love these muses. I think they're fabulous. And my favorite, of course, is Clio, which is the history muse. We have some other great features of art in our area as well. Lenka did these amazing pieces of artwork that are now on the McClellan Trail, which goes over the Jordan and Salt Lake Canal. You can take that walk. It's a walking place. It's a place for biking. It goes along the McClellan and up along 12th East, goes up to Milton. Eventually, it'll go all the way out through the rest of the valley. And her big sculptures represent the tools and the gears that actually work the Salt Lake and Jordan River or Jordan Canal. She's also got some artwork out in front of the county health department, so you can recognize her work. And then looking to the future, we will get out of the blue this wonderful breaching whale, which I think just adds another dimension of uniqueness to our neighborhood. And I took like 10 minutes too long. Here are my resources. If you have any questions, please let me know later on and I can hopefully answer them. Or if there's something I don't know, I will find it out. So thank you.
Wow, what a treasure, Sherry. Really appreciate the time you took to put this together. Learned a lot, and I appreciate you also sharing your PowerPoint presentation with us. We'll be able to put that up on the ALPCO Facebook page in our next newsletter so that folks can go back and maybe look a little closer at some of the maps and kind of see some of the details. But wow, really cool. Learned a lot, and thank you for taking all this time. And what a great segue to finish on 9th and 9th, because up next we have folks to talk about the 900 South Reconstruction Project. So we have Tom Millar from Salt Lake City Transportation, as well as some folks from Lochner. And let me just make sure that you guys can talk. Who is going to talk? Tom, are you going to start off, or?
Yeah, I'll start, and then I'll turn it over to Josh Willey to talk about timing when I'm done.
Sounds good. Take it away.
Great. Everybody, it's great to be here, and it's great to learn from Sherry about the history of the area. I am also a fellow Big Field resident, and just a little bit south of you guys. and it's a great place to live. So tonight we're going to talk about the 900 South reconstruction project. It will start or end, I guess, depending on how you're looking at it, at Lincoln Street, sort of where we left off a couple of years ago. And it'll go all the way west to 9th West. So that's a really long project, a 3-mile long project. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about what it's going to do generally throughout the whole corridor, and then we're going to focus a little bit on the 9th and 9th area and the changes that you'll see there. And then Josh will talk about timing, when we expect construction to occur, and then I'll finish it up with my call to action. So I'd like to tell you what's happening, why, and what the benefits are. So let me start sharing my screen, and then we can get started. Hopefully this works. Thumbs up if you can see my screen okay. Awesome, so good. Okay, so first off, I wanna say that we want to be in touch with you guys, and we want you to reach out with any questions that you have. So there's our website. You can follow along for updates. Next week, we want you to check out the website because the whole design for the whole 3 miles is going to be there. We want you to zoom in as close as you want to, check out all of the details and the changes that are coming. And then we really want to hear from you, whether you like it or whether you hate it or whether you're somewhere in between. We want to know what we can do better and what you want us to do more often. You can email us as well to get on our email list in English and in Spanish. And then you can call the project hotline, or you can call me directly if you have any questions about how to figure out the design. So please take a look at that within the next couple of weeks. I don't mean this as an ominous statement, but if you don't tell us what you want now, we may not be able to get it into the final design. So even though construction's still a ways off, now is the time to review the design and let us know what you think. Okay, so the what. Here's a basic overview of what's happening west of 9th and 9th. The existing street looks like this, where we have 2 lanes in each direction. We don't have a center turn lane, there's just a yellow stripe. So this is kind of what you have near Liberty Park and to the west. What we're going to change it into is a narrower roadway, so less pavement. We're going to be doing a partial depth reconstruction where we take off the first few inches of the street and put a brand new asphalt surface that'll last for a couple more decades. That'll be nice. And then on the south side, you see where most of the change is occurring. So that park strip will get much wider, and then the 9-line trail will go in there. It'll be very similar to the design of the project between Lincoln Street and 1100 East that we did just a couple of years ago, that narrowing, but it will be an asphalt instead of concrete. As I mentioned, a big feature is the 9-line trail. So right now the trail is complete in a few sections, but the biggest and maybe most important section where the most people live and there are the most destinations is incomplete. So we will build that 2.5 miles of the orange segment that you see there on the map as part of this project. And that trail will be above the curb in the park strip. It'll be a concrete trail, just like you see near McClelland and 10th East today. Safe, comfortable, protected for your family to go on a bike ride. You don't have to ride in the street. In addition to that, there will be better crosswalks, not only on the south side where the trail's going, but better crosswalks and shorter crosswalks along the entire street. Improved UTA bus stops that'll be accessible to anybody regardless of their age and ability, and a lot more park strip landscaping on the south side of the street. And again, that's where most of the changes are occurring. Also, new curb and gutter on the south side for the whole south side, and then on the north side where it's in bad shape. A new center turn lane west of 700 East will make it easier to turn left in and out of those destinations, easier and safer. And then down at Central 9th between 300 West and West Temple, there will be some pretty significant improvements there. Some new parking, as well as 100 new trees, about 30 or 40 new bike racks, and wider sidewalks and an extension of the 9-line trail as well. Our underground improvements are not as extensive as we thought that they were going to be. So that's good because the impact to you guys will be less. We'll be doing less digging than we had planned. And that was because of some budget changes in our public utilities department. And then we have our parking studies going on, and that was because we heard from all of you and many more during our 2018-2019 project on 900 South that we really shouldn't look at parking from just the perspective of one street when we're doing a project. We should look at larger areas. So we've done basically 3 parts to this parking study. We've done the 9th and 9th area between 7th East and 13th East. We've done the central 9th area because those are the 2 busiest. And then we've also studied all of the parking on 900 South, and that's helped us to come up with a much better design that knows exactly where the parking is and how often it's used and when it's used the most. And if we need to make any changes, where they're the most appropriate and where we can make up some of the impact nearby so that there's not too much pain in the short term. Why are we doing this? Well, one, the street needs to be redone. It's starting to crack and settle and not be such a great drive anymore. It's also been planned since about 1992 to extend or to build that 9-line trail. It was formerly called the Trans Valley Corridor. And since then, it's shown up in many more plans, and now's the time to do it now that we have the money to do it. And here are some of the benefits. Again, I've talked about a lot of these as we've gone on. And I want to get into the really important stuff, what it's going to look like and what the benefits and trade-offs are going to be. So here's 9th and 9th right now, looking to the west. You can see the cleaners on the left. You can see Children's Hour there on the right, and the lovely historic building just to the west of Children's Hour and Stockist there. On the next slide that I'm going to show you, it's going to have what the intersection looking west will look like in the future. And I can go back and forth between these a couple of times. So the changes that you'll notice on the north side, there really aren't too many changes other than moving the bus stop from in front of Vessel to in front of Stockist. The medians stay where they are. The street lights stay where they are. Almost all of the improvements that were made in 2006, 2007, and paid for by the property owners will stay. Most of the change occurs there on the south side. Basically, we'll take the parking that's there, the angled parking, and we'll scoot it a little bit to the north, narrowing the travel lane a little bit. And then in the remaining space between the sidewalk and the relocated parking will be where the 9-line trail goes. And those will be different textures. They'll also have a little 1-foot separator between them out of a different material so that it's very clear where you're supposed to walk and where you're supposed to bike. And we'll introduce some design elements to the trail so that it's not a trail for people to go 15, 20 miles an hour through 9th and 9th on their bikes. They're going to be going more at that pedestrian speed. And then one thing I wanted to point out was that we are fixing the concrete on the inside of the intersection, but we don't have the exact design of what the colored concrete is going to be or the scoring or anything like that. So we haven't shown that there. And then one other thing I'll point out before I get into to impacts is that the corner islands here on the, if you can see my cursor, maybe you can, these corner islands will get bigger. So where some of the 9 muses are right now, those will remain, but they'll get a little bit more breathing room away from traffic. And there will be some more landscaping in there. Those corners will also get a little bit tighter so that as people are making right turns, they're not driving as fast across both of those crosswalks, which will make it much nicer to drive, or sorry, to walk and bike in 9th and 9th. Okay, so the first thing that I want to talk about is trees. Because we're moving the parking to the north and replacing a lot of the park strip there with the trail, some of the trees will have to be either relocated there in front of Nexus. Those will be relocated just a few feet to the south. or removed and replaced with new trees. Now, our urban forestry division is very adamant, and as are we, that we want to provide as much shade as possible. We want to make our streets cooler, better places to be. All of us are in agreement there. In order to get the trail in, there are 3 trees that are sort of unavoidable. At least 2 of them are unavoidable. We're working on a design to avoid one of those 3. So what they ask us to do is plant new trees nearby that will replace the same caliper inches, if that makes sense. If you have a 6-inch tree right now, we have to plant 3 2-inch trees. So it is a short-term loss that I do not like. But within 10 or 15 years, those trees will provide even more shade than the trees that we have there right now. And then here's a close-up of where those trees are. So the 3 are basically in front of the tower and coffee garden that will be removed and then replanted very nearby. And then the 4 that will be just relocated are in front of Nexus there at Lincoln Street. The public art that I mentioned will remain. It'll just be in a slightly different position or slightly different orientation. So the concrete color and the scoring will change, but it will still be put back after that's done. The 9 muses will go into storage during construction and then be reinstalled. And the leaf patterns in the sidewalk and the trail will be redone if they are damaged. And then in the new trail will be mimicked there to extend from the sidewalk into the trail. Okay, are you ready for the 3rd impact? This is the one that everybody loves. Parking. We love parking.
Don't say the P word.
Yeah, I had to. There will be a couple of spaces that will be repurposed for a new purpose because of this design. And let me talk you through some of those. There are 2 spaces in front of the Stockist and 2 spaces in front of the former Mazda building or restaurant frontage that will be repurposed because the bus stops are being relocated to what we call the far side of the intersection so that the bus can get through the intersection rather than stop multiple times because of the light. We have spoken with the property owner and the property manager for the Mazda Great Clips Dolcetti location. And we are meeting with the property owner and the tenants of the Stockist Children's Hour building next week to talk about those impacts and to also find places nearby where we can potentially replace that parking that's just as convenient as those parking spaces. You'll see a little bit of green, or sorry, a little bit of red here and a little bit of green here, and that's because there's no net parking loss in front of Coffee Garden in the tower. There's just 1 spot lost near East Liberty Tap House and 1 spot gained because the bus stop is moving in front of Coffee Garden. And then west of Windsor Street, there are a few more parking spaces that are being lost, or sorry, repurposed for the bus stop on that south side, as well as transitioning the lanes into the 9th and 9th area. So again, to recap, at 9th and 9th itself, 4 parking spaces repurposed for better bus stops, larger plaza areas for the busiest stop for Route 9 in this area. And then 3 here for realigning the lanes into 9th and 9th, and 2 here again for the bus stop. And what we're doing right now is finding places very nearby within a few hundred feet of these parking spaces where we can potentially add new parking that does not exist right now. And then with that, I will turn it over to Josh to talk about the timeline when we can expect these changes and how we can help you through that. And then I'll finish up with some more information and answer any questions that you have.
Okay, thanks, Tom. So due to the length of this corridor stretching from 900 West to Lincoln Street, and also due to the varying scope of the improvements that will happen in different locations along the corridor, we've decided to break construction up into 2 different phases. Phase 1 is in the Central 9th area, and that roadway work goes from 300 West to West Temple. Phase 1 the design has been completed, and we have a contractor selected, and that work will begin in a couple of weeks. July 6th, they're planning on kicking off the work in that location. Phase 2 then encompasses the rest of the corridor, both east and west of Phase 1. So it goes from 900 West to 300 West, and then from West Temple to Lincoln Street. All of that will be part of Phase 2. And as Tom said, we're still going we're still in the middle of the design process for Phase 2, and continuing to prepare the construction plans for Phase 2. We plan on bidding out the Phase 2 project this fall. We'll complete the design over this summer and into the fall. Bid the project out in the fall, select a contractor, get them ready to go throughout the winter, and then early next year is when construction will begin on Phase 2. Both Phase 1 and Phase 2 are planned to be 2-year projects, but the second year of Phase 1 will overlap with the first year of Phase 2. So overall, the construction along 900 South will last for 3 construction seasons. It'll begin this in a couple weeks here in July, and then the end of Phase 2 will happen around fall of 2023. So it's 3 years of construction that you'll see on 900 South. So it's you know, a lot of construction that will be happening along the corridor. But while portions of the corridor will be under construction at some point throughout those 3 years, the entire corridor will not be under construction for the full 3 years. So we'll work with the contractors that get selected to build this, to have them stage their construction to just work in kind of isolated areas along the corridor. So as they go into an area, they'll, you know, do the demolition work and put it all back together before they move on to the next stage as they move along the corridor. So there will be disruptions along certain places along the entire corridor for those 3 years, but you know, we'll do our best to try to isolate those areas so that we're not impacting the entire corridor for the full 3 years. So that's our plan. Until we have a contractor selected for Phase 2, we won't know what that staging will look like. So right now, the most information I can give you on, you know, what construction will look like for Phase 2 is that it'll be 2 years, and that we'll work in specific areas at any given time. But I can't tell you yet, you know, what that timing will be and which sections will be under construction at which time. Once we have a contractor selected this winter, we'll work with them to develop that schedule and that staging. Once we have that schedule developed, then we'll come back to the public and inform you of what that scheduling will look like, so you know what to expect and when to expect it, and have as much time as you can to prepare for that and get ready for it. So I can't tell you yet when they'll be in your neighborhood, but we will come back once we have that information to give that to you, so you can get ready for it. A few things that we're doing to try to make it easy for the public to receive information and also to give us feedback and answer questions is we're going to keep a consistent outreach team throughout the entire 3 years during both phases of construction. So the city personnel assigned to these 2 phases will be the same during design and construction. We also have the Lochner team. We're going to have them under contract to help us with outreach throughout design and construction for both phases. So the website, the email, the hotline you see here on your screen, those will be the same points of contact that you'll have to be able to receive information and also pose questions and give us feedback on any issues that come up throughout the entire project. That will remain the same. So if you don't have that information yet, take a second and make sure you write that down or grab a screenshot or something, because those will be important contact points to keep throughout the entire project. So that's one way we're trying to alleviate the pains of construction is to try to keep that consistent outreach for the public throughout the entire project. A few other things that we'll do is let's see, Lochner will be helping us with some specific outreach to try to support local businesses during construction. We know that's always difficult for local businesses, so they'll be doing things like preparing, setting up, and maintaining A-frames to help advertise for local businesses, to help direct patrons through the construction to local businesses so they can, get in and out of the construction and still be able to make it to your individual businesses. Once a contractor is on board and under construction, they will be responsible for handling weekly notices to property owners when they're working in front of your property, making sure that they're staying in close contact with you for any specific things that will affect your property. Things like that we will do to make sure that we're working as closely as we can with the public to make sure you're informed about any impacts that construction will have on you, and also to be able to respond as quickly as we can to any issues or concerns that come up during construction. So yeah, get on the email list, go to the website, get familiar with these different points of contact, because those will be important for you as we move through construction on this project.
Thanks, Josh. And then lastly, I'll put this information again if you want to screenshot it. And again, my call to action is to next week when it's live, go and check out the interactive corridor map. It's pretty cool. It's like having an open house, but it's online. You don't have to put pants on. You go in, it's like you're at an open house. You see some posters on some easels, and then you see a big map on a kind of a virtual table. You can click in different parts of that map, and it's interactive. So if you want to click on something, it'll pull up the the reason for that change or the benefit that you might see, as well as some really cool 360 kind of street view existing proposed visuals, so that you can kind of go into the street like you're there driving or walking. You can see what it looks like now, and then you can turn it on to see what it would look like in the future. And we'll have those at several points, one at 9th and 9th, one at 5th East, down by the Maven District at Central 9th, and then a little bit farther west. So you can see really what it'll look like if you're not a weird transportation planner or designer like me and can understand exactly what's going on from the bird's eye view. So it'll be really easy to understand what's going on. We'll have the information about parking, about trees, about bus stops, anything that you want to know. So please go in there, find wherever you want to start, check out whatever you want to check out, and then leave a comment, send us what you think. And I'll say this with a lot of certainty. You must tell us now, or else that might be too late later to make a change. We want to make changes that you guys want, and that support the overall goals of the neighborhoods and the project itself. And so we really want your input now, so that we can make as good and as cost efficient and time efficient of a project as we possibly can. So I think if there are any questions, we will probably take a couple of them, and then we're planning on doing a follow-up video answering other questions. So if you have any questions that you want us to answer in the video, and for all of your neighbors to also hear, please put those in the chat, or send them to our email, or send them to Jason, and we'll put that video together here in the next little while, and then push it back out so that everybody can see it and learn a little bit more about the project.
There was one question that came in on the chat that might be good to
great.
address right now, and that's from Zach, and he asked, what is the gain loss of parking spaces between Lincoln and 700 East?
Oh, good question. Let's go to the overall map. Let me see. I think I'll have to stop sharing here.
It looked like there were some green gains and some red losses, and I think Zach, and actually, great question. I was wondering the same thing with the net.
Yeah, it's a really great question. So starting at Liberty Park, we'll be making the crosswalk and the trail crossing of 7th East about 20 feet shorter than it is right now, so that'll be much nicer. There will be one spot gained here near 7th East. on the south side. There will be 2 spaces lost here at 8th East on the south side. 3 spaces here. 1 space here in order to preserve the health of this really, really large tree in front of East Liberty Tap House. And then 1 gained here in front of the tower and coffee garden. And then 2 here on the south side by the former Maza, and 2 here on the north side by Stockist and Children's Hour. And then that's it. The rest of it stays the same. And like I mentioned, we're also looking for, we're looking at some different places where we can add a couple of parking spaces. We're looking right now at Windsor Street and 8th East, because we are making 9th South a little bit narrower. We may also be making Windsor and 8th East a little bit longer. And so there may be a couple more spaces that we add there just around the corner from where they are right now.
So I just got out my calculator, and I think I got a net loss of 8 spaces if you take all those pluses and minuses.
Between 7th and Lincoln. Okay, that's good. And again, like I mentioned, when we did that parking study, we counted how many cars were parked in each parking space at every hour of the day for a weekday and for a weekend. That was 7 a.m. to midnight. So we got all the people before work, during the lunch rush, evening, dinner, and then bedtime. So we know exactly how much each space is being used at different times of the day. And it was kind of refreshing to us that the use west of Windsor was not very high, and that it would be not a huge change to have these parking spaces repurposed for the new purposes that they'll occupy, and then just to have the minimal, basically 4 parking spaces in the core of the business district that'll be repurposed for bus stops. But like I said, we are looking for other spaces to help offset those spaces that are going to new purposes in the future.
Great, thanks for walking through that, Tom. These maps are incredible, the amount of detail, and
yeah, thanks to our Lochner team that have put them together, and the whole design team that's been everybody from transportation and engineering down to forestry and fire, and it's been awesome to work together on something so early on rather than kind of rushing at the end to do it. So we'd love your comments on them too.
Great, well, we'll put out a call to questions for that video that we'll do a little bit later, and field those. And if not, I'll just make a whole bunch up. But hopefully, based on our experience with the prior section from Lincoln to 13th East. But any more questions for Tom, for Josh, for the team here? Looks like we're good. We look forward to having you come back, and look forward to creating some. Oh, yes, Jonathan, you did. I'm sorry. Jonathan had one. I think it was actually had been discussed. But Jonathan, do you want to go ahead and put that question out? Oh, hold on, Jonathan. I got you locked down. There you go.
Thank you, Jason. Tom, a great presentation, and being new to the 9th and 9th area, I just so vibrant, and I think this will bring a lot of great, especially
oh, we're losing your audio there.
Yeah, I couldn't hear you there for a second.
Oh, sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm super excited about this. The one thing I've talked a little bit about to a couple city planners and someone that Darren actually connected me with. One of the things that I think would be really awesome that many other cities have done across the country is paint the 9th and 9th area, especially Harvey Milk Boulevard. I've seen the design here. It looks like a pink like brick structure, on the concrete, painted concrete. If we were able to get a rainbow crosswalk on the 9th and 9th corridor, is that something that we can talk about, or what is the process of getting that feedback to you and the team for this design?
Yeah, I'm not sure, Jonathan, I'm not sure if you're the one that spoke with our director, John Larson.
Yeah, that was me. Yep.
You did? Okay.
Yep.
Okay, good. I'm glad that I'm making connections now.
Yep.
So yeah, he did forward that suggestion on to me. I did have a meeting with the Arts Council and with ELPCO leadership to discuss it as well. And we did have some good outcomes from that meeting that I can send along to you.
Okay.
As to kind of what was discussed. There wasn't like a final, this is what we're doing kind of determination, but I'll send you those talking points and see if we can continue that discussion too.
Yeah, if we can, see what the next steps are in getting that design into this project, I think it would be, especially, on Harvey Milk Boulevard, it would be definitely an attraction to the area and to the businesses. And I've seen this. I put a link in the chat there about San Antonio putting theirs together and just finishing that up before Pride. And it's something that's permanent, so it's going to be there for many years to come.
Not just crosswalks and gin, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Great. Thank you so much.
Great. Thanks for bringing that up, Jonathan. Any other questions for Tom or the team? I think we're good. This is going to really transform 9th and 9th and further down the road. Look forward to seeing it. And thank you for always keeping us updated. We'll come in at the last minute and tell you what we want. That's pretty much how we operate. So just kidding.
Thanks, everybody.
We've learned our lesson. All right. Tim Cosgrove is up next from the Salt Lake City Mayor's Office. Tim, thank you for being here and giving us an update. Hold on, Tim, 1 second. You should be able to unmute now, Tim.
Okay, thank you. Thanks everyone for staying around and waiting to the very end. That's a lot of good information that Sherry shared. And I want to thank Councilmember Mano and the City Council and all the work that they did on the budget. There are a few budget highlights that the mayor had prioritized, and we felt those were invaluable and important in getting that budget passed. I put the link in on the chat, so if you have questions, you can see the budget for yourself. I also just added the link. I understood there was some confusion on the CIP funding, and just to make sure that everybody's aware, it's very clear and very transparent. The mayor also put a budget book together on how that process took place and the projects that were awarded funding for this ongoing next fiscal year for 2022. And I put that in the link as well. The ban on fireworks, I included in part of the discussion, the calls, the questions that we get in the mayor's office to help clarify, add some clarity to those issues that people have questions on, and I'm happy to answer additional questions if anyone has any. And I can end there. We covered everything. You did a great job covering the drought last month, Jason, and being water wise, and the public utilities 7-gallon water challenge that's currently going on now, and all the resources that we have available. Our office is putting together, that's coming out tomorrow, and I can forward those to you as well for your newsletters on, we've had questions asking about xeriscaping during this time to help clear up some of the confusion that it's not always better just to put rocks down because it generates heat from the solar, from the sun, and better ways that you can plan for xeriscaping during a drought.
Got it. Okay. The one thing I think I probably would want to bring up is, as we head into fireworks season, you might see some of your neighbors out there shooting off fireworks, even though they're banned in Salt Lake City. We always recommend in ELPCO that you walk over and you just say something first before you call the non-emergency number. You call the fire department if something's on fire, obviously. But you can use ELPCO. Say, hey, look, I heard on ELPCO that fireworks are banned in Salt Lake City. Not sure if you knew about that. It's just a more neighborly way to kind of get that across. as opposed to, escalating things a little bit more. And sometimes people do things because they don't know. Folks who attend our meetings tend to know what's going on in our city. Not everyone else does. So I would just recommend that approach before you end up calling the non-emergency number or any other kind of enforcement. Just be a neighbor, let folks know, and see if you can resolve it that way. Obviously, if someone's house on fire, we know who to call, but hopefully we won't get there. Any questions for Tim? Any other issues going on? I will say that this is our last meeting before we take our summer vacation. Like the puzzler from the old Car Talk days, we go on a vacation and we will be gone in July and August and return in September. In person, we are thinking maybe a hybrid meeting. And we're very pleased that Tim has been able to arrange Salt Lake City Mayor Aaron Mendenhall to be our featured guest at that meeting. So we'll look forward to that. I believe it's September 23rd when we'll be back. And we'll try to actually make that an elected officials event too. Bring in folks from our Utah House and Utah Senate districts, County Council. Darren, we appreciate you being here. We'll ask you back then as well. And just sort of make sure that we have kind of like a bit of a political elected official meeting, because it's great to have the mayor kind of headline that. So with that, I will say keep in touch with Elko over our summer vacation. We'll be sending out our newsletters. We'll be producing videos. And I just wanted to take one last chance to thank Sherry for her presentation. Fantastic. It just taught us so much about our city. We'll be getting that out on a video and also your presentation, so more and more people can learn from that. I am sure we will have much better educated Elko residents about their neighborhood thanks to your efforts. So, and the fact that we now know we live in the sticks. So that's good. Well, with that, I bid everyone a safe and happy weekend and 4th of July, and we'll see you in person and online over the next couple of months and back in September. Thank you much.